All right, welcome back, guys. I dropped the stream, and now we have a interesting take that I thought was a little bit relevant to what we're talking about. There's a little bit of complex concepts in here. However, at the same time, I think it's really interesting because one question I definitely want to put out there is, how do you feel as though this sort of take um, mirrors with the current stage of society? For example, there is a stage in society where in the 90s where there remember the big like boom of guru trends and those kinds of things.
Oh yeah.
So we're seeing a big boom of that. And so Buddhism came to China at a time when intellectuals were hungry for fresh ideas, but it arrived with massive handicaps. It was saddled with Indo-European focus on an appearance reality, metaphysics, and epistemology. With approximations to concepts of truth, right, which is fundamental to what we're talking about today, Ben, right? So
Yeah.
this sense data experience, it minds as a container of subjectivity or of a subjective world populated by counterparts of sensible objects, right? That's really interesting. And so this is a propositional kind of view and a representational belief, a belief, desire, psychology together with a logical informed concept of reason as both a human faculty and as a property of beliefs and concepts. And that's, I think, very much in parallel to what we're talking about and the progression of Buddhism to this stage really sort of comes to the idea, I think Ben and Ed, you guys paralleled with, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it really starts from within and it becomes something that is sort of like an itch you can't get rid of. What if you didn't follow that? What would happen to a life? And then what if you did? What does that do to a life? It's the interesting thing is I think belief is conceptualized by results. Why would someone believe in something with no results? That's a good question. How about we kick it off from there? Or what did I miss that you guys proposed before we drop the stream?
Yeah, that's a really good. Believing something without results is is right at the core of this. Because results are evidence. And the question is, fundamentally can you believe in something without evidence? And so we have the question really is, can you believe in something without evidence? And I think that you can, but instead of evidence, you are getting it from a relationship. You're getting it from someone. You get it through trust. You trust someone, so you use that instead of evidence. That's the only. So what I think that we're going to find here is that the only, what's it called, replacement for evidence is trust.
Ed, how does that feel?
I'm not sure if I can 100% buy in.
Yeah.
I can say definitely. I think trust can take the place of evidence. Absolutely. In lieu of trust or evidence, is there space? Is there a vacuum that could be filled by something else that would produce belief?
And
Suffering.
well, so real quick, I think that a lot of the stuff that we get from within is actually evidence, appears as evidence to us, like is actually in the evidence column.
Well, I have a question then. And this is to help our understanding.
Mhm.
So, and anyone listening to the stream here, we always take we try to take a approach of really active listening and building upon each other's topics when it comes down to it. And in no way do we ever, I think, try to determine what is truth or other things like that. It's the idea of how can we better understand each other. So back to my question of how can we better understand each other through this example. So let's take the idea of any religion. And the idea of religion helps people with the idea of death in one regard. Many other things, but let's say that's most pertinent to this because it's the room and only one gets out alive. It's Saw. It's one of the great fascinations of what happens after that. And so what it does is it offers an idea with no result.
I don't understand.
How does that play in because you can't ever get the thing you're basically putting into an investment, right? In like the Catholic religions, for example, you're investing into not sinning, right? Or investing into the church in a lot of the ways of that men have done it. Now, I'm not talking about the core religions, but I'm talking about what is out there in the world as these symbols of trust, the thing that represents trust, and how is that being handled? Because then we can come back to the actual concept, right? So once we understand like the basis of like belief systems or other things like that, then we can understand, how we have actually used that. And then how we have used that produces the way we conceptualize that. Cool? Or not cool? Or what did I miss, guys?
I missed one of the layers somewhere in the stack.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay, so let's say we understand the basis of belief, right? Let's say we one day, or maybe in this conversation, come to a good agreement on what we feel as though it is today without the establishment of truth nor defining it for anyone else other than the pursuit of learning. Cool?
Yeah.
Kind of space.
Yeah.
Secondly, so that's the understanding of belief at the baseline. And then what's above that? That's how it's used, right? We have lots of examples like Ponzi schemes or the other side that's appreciated is like, who's the guy in Dances with Wolves, Field of Dreams?
Kevin Costner,
right? And then you have the appreciated side of that, right? So we have two sides of a spectrum, right? We have really great as far as the current societal norms, which is a whole nother side conversation in how things are perceived, what is truth and what isn't in certain periods, and spiral dynamics actually comes into this. And then the other side is like not good, right? Like Jordan Peterson talked about, like the Gulag Archipelago is malevolence and evil, right? That's not good. That's bad. And this is good, right? But this is like very ethereal and like, what is good? Actually, Ben here is my good barometer in my life, as well as my wife and many others now. It's a great concept of like, is this good? Right. And so that's sort of like the second layer is this good what we're doing with a system, right, Ben? So here's the system that we're trying to offer some semantic description and understanding around. Do you want to start your stream as a note? Your screen share?
Oh, yeah.
And then, so that's like, we're working at this level right now, guys, right? We're at the system level. And then we have like a usage level. And then the next level is like, we come back to defining or justifying, essentially, we're doing a proof, right? We would then come back to justifying how we semantically describe it as at the third layer, right? So I think the next step of this is obviously like, we'll work on the system here. And then our next goal, I feel it should be then to give some examples of like how this is working in the world and how it hasn't worked very well, sort of define the ends of that spectrum. And then this is just a proposal, and then see that loop as defining the proof, right?
So then, okay, let me see if I can get this. If I get this, technology, use cases, and the results of those use cases. We're talking about technology here. We're talking about how you put that technology to work, and then we're talking about what happens when you put that technology to work. Like, if you give everybody cars, people get fatter.
So what if the first true AI comes out and says, hey, I'm going to blow up a whole town? Do you think that we're going to see new AIs coming out? Right?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not for a while, right? It's a really interesting thing. If we, so I know Ed, I think, had to go to work when it came down to it. Um, I'm very interested in, like you said, the system, then the use cases, and then we have to watch out for how we self-justify that,
Right.
is what I was alluding to. Thank you for condensing that down.
Yeah.
And that, honestly, I think in an objective space can't loop back, right? We can't, we unfortunately, in a finite resource world, until we start being way more efficient with our resources, we almost have to outrun those constraints. You know what I mean? Is seemingly what we're doing.
Meaning we can't go from justification back to technology?
It doesn't seem as though that failure should deter us, for example. So one
Right.
AI blowing up a town versus it being the possible salvation to lift off of the world, like in the Bobiverse, which is
Right.
a book that both me and Ben really love, and it talks about some of these very similar subjects.
Yeah.
So Ben, let me hand the ball back. You know, I'm going to throw the ball back to you, right? No. Here, so here we go. You ready? Oh yeah, so that's way better. All right, yeah, that is a blast. All right, so ball's in your court, sir. What do you think? What do you feel?
Yeah, I am very much in the camp of the belief that technology should be explored, whether or not whether or not like the technology should be explored pretty much in all cases. I think that the way that it's researched is important. Like, how about like, you know, being ethical with the research. But I think that the technology itself, I don't think there's any technologies that we should avoid researching,
That's
because I
interesting.
think knowledge.
The ethical side. Sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Oh,
Interrupted.
yeah. No, because I think knowledge is a worthy ability, is a worthy pursuit. And I'm gonna get in trouble because there's gonna be some fringe thing here, but I don't care. I'm too naive to care.
So when you like in Nietzsche's Metamorphose, like we talked about recently, the dean of the no shits given college. Everyone meet Ben Halloran.
Yeah.
And Ben is one of the most childlike minds like myself that can really, I think, create new. That space for us is it's one that can very much be replicated, and so that's something we both believe in, right? For example, I think that's a pretty good example because it's close to home and it helps the audience better understand really, you know, what we're doing, how we've gotten there, and why we even get out of bed and why they should care. So really the why we get out of bed is something that I feel need to align with what we do. And if we can really believe every day in what we do, that makes everybody's life better. So the intention isn't to wool gather here, right, Ben? It's really to help map governance and really empower people to do better.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe this is not an answerable question, and I wanted to hear what Ed's feedback was on this, although I have some speculations.
I
Okay,
don't know if it is answerable. In
this
fact,
is probably I
good to understand concepts that allow us to have conversations.
no okay, but we're not we don't need perfect truth. We need good enough. So the question is, can we get into that? You know, it's asymptotic. It's the Gaussian bell curve. It's the, you know, 90th percentile. Can we get good enough that the can we get to a point where we can kind of ignore the other effects? We're engineers here, right? Like, you know, if you have a thing and it produces very little heat in your analysis, you can ignore the heat in the analysis. It's not important. But if the heat's a big part of the system, like if you're, you know, you're working on an LED or something like that, it's like, okay, maybe we should look at the heat, make sure it's, but so I want to do is get to a point where we can simulate this without getting wildly inappropriate results, because we don't have enough, our model isn't good enough.
And yeah, that's interesting because then, you just use the word appropriate, right? Which is based on truth, if
Yeah,
whatever it is, and then we're in another loop again or we're inserting truth into an unknown loop of defining that truth, right? Which is why
right.
I had issue with the justification coming back to technology. And in fact, I can't tell you how many tests have been needed to define something as acceptable, right, in certain regards, and it's more specific for the threat to human life, for example, like
Yeah,
tests on things, parts, and other things like that, and planes or other things.
yeah,
The DNA cycle, mapping the genome, the amount of research that goes into things. It's really fascinating when you're looking for universal truths and you're looking for those kinds of things. If you're looking for the things to empower the things that have been there between us as people since the beginning of us, would you then be still looking for a universe? Is that a universal truth in the same way?
I got distracted thinking about self-driving cars
Tell
and
me
all
more
the,
about self-driving cars. Yes.
well, so this is a thing where you have this technology where it's like, oh, so now we have really awesome cameras and really awesome computers and really awesome neural network software technology, and we can build a car that can follow white lines. Actually, that was done back in the 70s. You just put a little thing that like reads the color of the line, right? And so it just tells if I'm on the white, you can find the white line with a color. That's pretty easy. But of course, if you run out of white line, or if you come to an exit, it just runs off the exit. So now our systems are orders of magnitude better than that, right? So you have a self-driving car. So we had the technology to build a self-driving car, and then now we're into the use cases. Like, okay, but can it actually work when it's snowing, for example? And then you get into the questions of, okay, but if you have a self-driving car, it will hit somebody, and whose fault is it? And now you have to like, did because you've invented this self-driving car and because you push the button to put it in self-driving mode and then it hits someone, independent of fault, like should this technology not have been invented because somebody died, like, or space, if a space shuttle part falls on somebody, should we not have had a space shuttle because there was a danger of the space shuttle exploding and killing someone?
So is the
And
question then instead, Ben, do you want to be legendary? Because how are all great legends made?
made with sacrifice.
People work.
Yeah.
So we
So
have often talked about humanity as a sacrifice to technology and cyberneticism and other things like that that might be in the future. And there are definitely some ethical and epistemological concerns that people might have. And we never intend here to overcome objections. We intend to explore them, just for
right.
anybody that's might be listening in.
And my take on this is, as you were saying, Bryant, you start with the technology. You're like, okay, well, a rocket is a giant bomb that goes up instead of outwards. So now we're going to make the use cases to make it, do you want to go to the moon? Do you want to get to orbit? Like the engineering of the technology so that you can figure out the control and all that stuff. The justification, then when you get past that, you get to the point, okay, rockets, like it could blow up and kill somebody, or you could be opening yourself up to a technology where a rocket is a kinetic energy weapon. So if you have this technology out there, it's kind of like if the technology for refining uranium is easy for people to use, then people will have uranium to build atomic bombs easily, and then that's a technology that's out there for everybody to have, which is an interesting thing, because I was just about to say I'm really of the mind that we take a technology and we look at use cases and we don't worry about the justifications. However, like, we don't worry about the justifications. We worry about the probable things, like, okay, let's not put a rocket factory in the middle of a city. Let's put it in the middle of nowhere. Let's fly a rocket so that they fly over oceans, so that when they fail, the chances of failure are we hit a boat, right, instead of hitting a city. So I'm like, yes, let's plan ahead and not directly rocket ourselves in the foot. But I think that there's always going to be a problem, and that there's always a way to abuse technology. And so we can't use the possibilities that come from justification to say this technology should never be used. And then I was talking about refining uranium and was like, well, maybe some technologies should be out there. But I don't know. I think regulation that's a whole nother can of worms.
So I have that clear in my mind. Could you describe that can of worms real quick without diving into it? So we might cover that in the future.
Yeah, regulation, the idea of regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, who gets to tell who, when you have a trolley problem, which is the trolley problem is a tool in a morality, in the understanding, is a tool that's used in the understanding of morality. And it brings up the concept of the value of humans, like what is the actual value of humans? So here, the trolley problem is there's a trolley that has lost its brakes and it's rolling down a hill, and there's a switch, and then there's two or some number of rails, some number of switches, and at the bottom of the rails are the experiment. So this is the blank experiment, and then the different versions of the experiment are you load the bottoms of the rails with, okay, well, what if you had the option to do nothing, and then this trolley goes down and hits a baby carriage, or flip the switch and it hits us and it hits an old person, a senior, right? So the question is, would you flip the switch? Is it right to hit the switch? Then you can start asking these questions. The trolley problem is a horrible thing because it's by design unsolvable.
It's ultimate power. You're talking about ultimate power there at the same time. Yeah.
And so the question is, so it allows you to dabble in the concept of, if you were given ultimate power in this situation, or if one was given ultimate power in this situation, what would be good range of outcomes for them to do? Like, is it okay for them to flip the switch? Is like what? It's a morality tool.
All I'll say is one thing that we can know here. Is one thing I feel is very clear to me. Maybe not can know, but feels clear to me, is that it's not okay for one person to bear that burden.
Right. And what I was getting to is, I really think that the only person that gets to decide if they're going to sacrifice themselves, I don't think, there's a lot of things, but I don't think.
See, now, yeah, you're touching self-suicide and other things like that.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's a very, it's good to understand here again, just where we should almost have disclaimers in our videos, like, hey,
oh my gosh,
hey, we genuinely, here's our disclaimer, guys. We love things objectively, right? We don't brand with hate, we brand with love. And what I mean by that is, the thing that we all have inside of us that our mothers loved us for, that person or whoever that was in your life. And at the end of the day, that's something we can all believe in, that there is someone who can love you, who can maybe listen to you, who can, find a way for you to explore and understand your life better. And so really, to be honest, we're just two dudes trying to understand life better. And we approach things both acknowledging the idea of learning and the idea of being right, Ben? And we try to walk the middle path and have both of those in view, and we discuss things. So we're a very neutral kind of observer. Do you think?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's the neutral observer disclaimer. Dun-it.
So let's jump back we keep, you know what it is we keep trying to dig down so that we can find a place that has solid rock so that we can build a foundation on that solid rock. And
House on a rock. That should be like
there is
founder community. Yeah. Sorry.
that.
Go ahead.
No, but that is where where the solid rock is a fascinating conversation. I have my own beliefs on that.
Well, that's interesting. Is it in the soup?
Oh, that's a fascinating thought.
I'm all fired up.
So
this is gonna be lots of fun.
So belief. Let's talk about belief for a second here. Rein it back in.
I believe we can do it. Here we go.
How do you what are the root causes of belief? What are the causes of belief? And we already saw, so evidence, seeing is believing, doesn't we talked about Santa Claus, and if you strictly follow seeing is believing, you come to the right conclusion, except for the fact that if you see somebody dressed up as Santa Claus, that's the whole thing. But anyway, the point is, evidence is a wide, easy road to belief. If you are given evidence of something, that's very easy to believe in. In fact, right. So faith is when you don't have evidence. But the other way that you can get evidence, the other source of belief is trust through a relationship of someone else. So by saying I've never seen any evidence, but my friend says, and I trust him, so I believe. Like, I believe that my friend saw something that looked like an alien flying over his house. I don't know if I believe that it was an alien, but I'm sure that I believe that he saw a circular thing with lights on the bottom that made no sound, that and his siblings saw it too, and the dogs, and it's not it. So I believe that he was not hallucinating, and I believe he wasn't making it up because I trust him. So trust. But the last way that we can get, so if these were, I think belief and evidence would be the big ones, and then we have a baseline kind of belief that is a smaller section of the pie, smaller slice of the pie. That's the baseline kind of beliefs that come from within with gut instincts, and so these are the kind of things that you don't have an evidence and nobody's told you, but you just know and you've decided to believe it, which actually, I think that's faith. Now that I look at this. So the three drivers of belief would be trust, faith, and evidence. And what I want to do is just have a discussion to see if a losing discussion where that has no outcome, to see if there's anything else besides those three that should be included in a model, an engineering style model.
I don't think we can see anything further than that currently. At least
well, then that's simple.
Into this discussion, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, then that's simple. That means that we have a small portion of the model that we can proceed forwards with an understanding that it's somewhat close to, that we're going to just call it correct for now because it's the truth enough that we have.
Now, here's an interesting thing. So I just had a thought. I heard someone say once, respect, trust, and loyalty. If you betray any one of them, you lose all three. So I feel as though respect helps build trust and loyalty.
So,
Or maybe that's the revalidation of trust through experiences. And, then that builds more respect.
so that sounds like a chain, right?
I'm thinking Fleetwood Mac, brother. The chain. Oh, man.
Right? If you lose, it's the trust, loyalty, and respect. If you lose any one of those, the chain breaks. It's a single failure mode. That's the failure mode style. It's not a parallel. It's a serial dependency.
Now I'm thinking about like DNA and fixing strands and those kinds of things. Like, how do you fix the chain? It's really interesting. Probably great for another conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So, cool. That's fun. So, brain's not working. I was going to do working. So now, I guess, well, so trust. So belief and trust come in a feedback loop where if you believe someone, then you trust. Well, if you trust someone, then you believe them.
I don't know about that. I think that's where we're missing an element now, I feel. I feel like
Yeah.
respect is in this loop.
Yeah. Oh.
Right? Because I think respect builds the ability to trust. And it's like, for example, Jordan Peterson, when he talks about active listening, where you show someone respect, and that's a path to trust.
Okay, so you have to, before you can have, okay, can you trust someone you don't respect?
No.
I don't know. I think you can.
I don't think fully.
Well, no, but you can trust
You can trust them with certain things.
Right, exactly.
Well, actually, hold on. Well, let's say they. Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. So this is like core values conversation. So
exactly
the way that you link those two feedback loops right there, those are actually, I think, core values. And the reason that someone is able to really believe in something is because it represents a certain amount of their core values. Because we're talking about decision making, right? Like really, when you bake it all down, we're talking about a system that allows people to feel as though they're part of something bigger than themselves, while the person can also be bigger and drive that thing to be bigger, right? And it's almost like an oscillation between the two, right? Sometimes at certain points that thing is bigger than us, and we go into our low cycles, right? And we have to grow. We go into our learning cycles, right? And then we go into a high cycle when we're able to be bigger or big as that thing, right? So I think that's believing in oneself is the ability to come out of a low cycle. And so we could think about that almost on a societal level, where a lot of people might consider yourself like if you are in a low cycle right now and you're listening to this video, we deeply understand, because we go through low and high cycles of productivity, and also that's rotational on what Ben calls the 3 projects. Ben, do you want to talk about the 3 projects for a second?
Yeah, sure. So my grandfather has works on old cars and stuff and tinkers around, and he's got this little car shop that he works on stuff. And he says you always have to have 3 projects. Now, he's not working on customers' cars. He's working on projects for himself. He says you always have to have 3 projects, because you're sitting there and you're tinkering on a thing, and the 3 projects are, as you sit there, the 3 projects are the one that you're working on, trying to get this stupid bolt into the thing. But that's not the one you're thinking about. So there's the one that you're working on, and then there's the one you're thinking about at the time. And the third one is the one that you are frustrated with and is on the shelf on the back burner. Now, 3 is a minimum. You could actually have 5 or 6. There are problems with that. You could have many on the shelf, but you can only have 2 active at a time, the one you're working on and the one you're thinking about, and then the ones that you aren't thinking about that are behind you. If you have 5 or 6 projects, the problem is as you rotate through the system, you don't show a lot for it. 3 is the fastest you can produce. So so you're working on a project, you're trying to get this bolt in, it's working, something's not working, or you're trying to get this bolt in. Meanwhile, you're thinking about this other project that was stalled, that used to be on the shelf, and you're thinking about this. Okay, so you get to this point where this project, the one you're working on, isn't working. Something's busted. You're like, oh man, I just don't know how to. So what you do is you move on to the one you've been thinking about for the last hour, and you start doing that one, because now you've solved it. So you're working on this one. So now this one that is frustrating goes back on the shelf, and you take the one that was on the shelf, and now that you're working on this thing, you just naturally think back to the one on the shelf, like, man, that one on the shelf, how do I fix that one? So it's a circular loop of, there's all kinds of stuff here. The one I am working on, the one I am with, the one I'm frustrated with, and lastly, the one I am thinking about, right? So, there's the one I'm thinking of. I don't know which way to draw the arrows in this. So, right. So the way that this works is you constantly go in a loop of wrapping around this loop. So you'll be working on this one, then you start working on this one, then you start working on this one, then you start working on this one. Meanwhile, you're always thinking about the one ahead, and you can take this out. You can take this out here and have 5 or 6 of these in here, right? That's fine. But the problem is, it takes you so long to get back to the original project that you will feel like you're not very productive. So anyway.
What defines so long?
Well,
it took you so long to get back to it. What do you mean?
So usually it takes like a day or so to solve the problems, because you have to sleep on it. You've heard of this problem where you're working on a coding problem, and it's just, the code's just like not working. And you come back in the morning and it's like, oh, what? This is so much simpler now.
Yep, I was running out of glucose.
Yep. And so that means that if you have to sleep on it before you can, so you're working on a project and you come to a problem you can't solve. So you move on to the one that you were solving in the background. Coding is a little bit harder for this. This is something, this model works well with things that you work on with your hands, because it allows you to have 2 at once. With coding, you probably could get away with 2 projects. But the point is, this one's frustrating. You find a problem you can't solve, so you move on to this one that you've been stewing about. You've been thinking about it in your free time, in the off time, and now this one is the one you're thinking about, and this is the one that's frustrating. And you've just iterated this. This is an array. You're just shifting through the array. But if it takes you, this is Monday and this is Tuesday, and you're here on Wednesday, and then you're back here on Thursday. So it takes you 4 days to get, I missed something. It takes you 4 days to get back to around the cycle. If you have more than 3 ideas, it takes you a full week to get around the cycle, and you can only make 1 day of progress per project per week. Whereas if you have 3 projects, you can make like 2 days of project per week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're really touching on the idea of the whole like Chinese principle, or the phrase from the warring period that said, chase 2 rabbits, get 0.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about catching. I think that's where we oftentimes get tripped up. However, there's always a drive to survive, right, at the same time. Right, so you have these Maslowian concerns pushing you into an idea of truth that you can survive through, like how to work with society and other things like that. And if you don't work well in that, it almost becomes a vicious feedback loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, where did the group go? So, respect. Trust,
Respect.
trust, loyalty,
Laser
and
drills.
respect.
Laser drills.
Yeah.
I have respect for heavy machinery. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that you know not to. Oh, look, that just fixed itself. That you know
That's
not to
interesting.
play with it.
Yeah, because if the wolf will bite you, if the lion, you have respect for lions, right?
Yeah,
Because no one wants to lose their hand, right?
yeah. Okay, so check this out. I think for you to believe someone, you have to respect them enough to believe in them. Right? You have to be loyal to someone to believe them.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So that's what I'm getting at is like, okay, there's these three. Maybe these three are prerequisites. Like we have
Yeah, this one and this one right here.
which
Yep.
one? Draw it.
Respect and capacity to trust.
Well, yeah, before you can trust, you have to have the capacity to trust other people, which I guess respect probably feeds into that, where you have to be able to respect people. And by the way, I'm kind of coding these ones as the relationship ones. The red ones are the relationship style. These are the ones that are, these are the interpersonal things. This is I don't like this anymore. Okay, fine. I guess I could leave it there. It's if we just start listing every possible wire, we will just have everything will be connected to everything, and we won't have a useful thing. Would you say?
It'll be glorious.
Yeah, but it won't be very useful.
So this is an interesting thing that I think a lot of elements come into play on. I think the ability to notice seems to be coming back to me as a prerequisite. And let's say that we simplify the equation down to this. Like, so since I have you on the screen share, I'm pretty sure I can drag you over to where I am, and I can probably use
Yep.
the frames to do that, right? So we have we have really a systemic problem, and when we think about this, right, this is really why me and Ben are, talking about this, right? And we'll probably work on a part 3 coming up here soon, as far as letting this digest a little bit, right? Like Ben just talked about, because I'm noticing after, working with him, we're a pretty well-oiled machine, and we notice like, hey, yeah, we should let this process for a little bit. This will probably come up soon as something that'll be worked out. But so what is respect, right? It's, I think, being able to relate to something, and if you can respect yourself and know about those things, right, you end up gaining like knowledge, as we might see right here. And then through experience, right, where you build loyalty with different people or other things along those lines, you can culminate a sense of wisdom, a sense of, you know, maybe not intuitive, well, actually sort of intuitive things, where you just know things or can pick up on things, or you've been through these experiences before. The interesting thing is bias, right? Like, okay, how hardened is that truth? Can you teach a dog new tricks? And so the really time and this journey for people has some interesting effects that we're just always hoping that people remain open-minded and objective to. And so, really at the end of the day, I really wouldn't want um, people to think that, this is really anything more than an experiment for people to see, how our minds work around different subjects, and to also know our minds as common knowledge as we move forward with building a community around this specific problem. And so we're talking about the idea of connection, right? Connection is, we form that on respect. And we have a time, right? And we have Maslowian concerns with security. And they push us to having to work with people on specific things and put things outside of our control, which is where the concept, I feel, of letting go of the outcome or trust comes from. Like a lack of time to do it alone, and you know you can do it better together. So I think trust is respect built. Incentive is, it's like a concept of what is out of our control, what is out of our view. I trust, like Aristotle talked about, the idea that this person is going to have a certain amount of virtuousness even when they're out of control, right? When they're outside of control, I believe in them enough to accept that they and I share a risk together, right? And so I think it's, as Kahneman talked about, people run fastest away from avoiding costs than they do towards benefit. And so when you codify an incentive system that helps people avoid cost, right? I feel as though that might be described as a trust system, right? Where you're helping people avoid cost through just, it's not even a, not helping, it's sort of something that's always been with us. Like, I respect you enough to help me survive, right? I will take a risk with you to help you survive because I have an inherent risk, which is the bear we all run from, right? Which is the Maslowian concerns like survival, right? So I think trust is, for us now, belief is, I think, the extension of that, from the individual. It feels like an individual can just believe something is possible and go create it, right?
Hmm.
So if someone can believe something and then just go create it and produce the results and create new semantic definitions, where does trust and belief and loyalty and those kinds of things sit with each other, right? So that's very interesting when you think about it. And where were you mapping before, Ben? I think you were over here.
It was, yeah.
Right. So, at the end of the day, it feels like to me this is a byproduct, right?
Loyalty is a byproduct of belief.
Of let's call it respect iterated through trust that builds more respect, right? So I think these two have a feedback loop to each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right. It feels that way, right? And we pretty clearly see that. And then I think that through that loop, we could almost reduce loyalty down to like a byproduct that comes out of that, right? And you would, that's interesting.
I don't think respect is a root cause of belief. I think trust is the root cause of belief. And so,
I think that's believing someone, but we're talking, see, here's the distinction that we haven't made. We're talking about either believing in an idea, an ideal, or a better state, and we're mixing that with believing in a person. So this is why I brought up the idea of religion is, let's say you have an ideal, right? It's part of the deal, an ideal deal, right?
right.
And there is no, you get it when you're out of control, when you're completely out of control, right? And so you have to act virtuous until that point that you get it.
I'm running out of glucose.
Agreed. That's a great question for next time, and we'll review this and try to come back to it. So for next time, the idea of ethics in play with believing in people and believing in actual ideals or outcomes or things outside of people as being possible or being able to be trusted after testing or failure, or what is the reason to keep going? Is it too early for society? Other things like that are in play. We've talked about a lot of concepts here that are great offshoots. Ben, I really appreciate this and anyone's time that benefited from it. Anybody that didn't benefit from it, I still appreciate your time as well. And you give us the opportunity in the future, and we're going to really try to empower the things that you want to do. That's what we enjoy doing, right, Ben? We love solving problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Problems are.
solving also with the idea that Ben mentioned on the idea of truth enough. So, Ben, if you want to, let's close it on the idea of truth enough here, sir. What does
All
that
right.
what does that mean to you?
I think, well, what I started this, or what I originally wanted to do, was put more design work or put more thought into this system, and I think we've moved it closer to truth enough. Like I think we've made progress, and I think it's awesome.
So definitely, come down and join us at bluprint.org. We really have a big jump community coincidentally built on virtuous spontaneity and, the idea of working with people in that space. And we worked with a lot of different engineers to work on vision without stories, innovators lacking exposure, contribution and mistrust, misaligned founders, competition being for losers. And we do a hell of a lot of rapid prototyping. Beyond that, our philosophy is in perfect alignment. What we're discussing here, the need, the itch, the restlessness that drives us to understand and learn these things is really part of our deep philosophy. And we've come to be through a very big process that has really changed both you and my life, Ben, right? And a lot of other people in the process. An ideal, right? We talked about here, right? An ideal became through belief in joy and fun, a community of innovators and the resources to build ideas and trust and security to collaborate, right? To make the campsite a little bit better. And thanks for helping me and other leaders join together to build a world organization now where we've really touched a lot of lives at this point in time. And so it's really grateful to have our values so clear of being authentic. And what's the second one, Ben?
I forget.
And then we have accept the outcome, give up on the outcome, surrender to the outcome, and do what's uncomfortable. And just straight up. And then we've got our swim lane values here. Like those are the values inside of those values. You know what I mean? And like Russian dolls all over. And then beyond that, our platform really is all about just, how would you say it? Empowering people to innovate. So thanks again for your time today, guys. This has been great. Ben, thanks, dude. And we're going to be recording regularly.
Hey, I just realized something cool.